All right. Hello. Let me pull this down. Hi, Emma. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. It turns out we've got a lot of sunshine and heat where I am here in California, up near Lake Tahoe. I don't know where in the world are you currently?
I am south of Salt Lake City, Utah. So it's 101
Ah,
today.
so yeah, you got some heat there too.
Yeah.
Hello, friends. It is wonderful to see so many folks joining us. If you could type into the comments, can you see us? Can you hear us? And let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always great to see what kind of a footprint we get on these events. So let us know where in the world you're joining from. And I am so excited to be joined today by Emma McAdam, who has been working with on the Discover platform and is developing all these incredible courses around how to process your emotions, which, we were just kind of talking about the evolution of how people converse about emotion and deal with emotion. And, even the difference between 10 years ago to now, where we've kind of collectively recognized this is something that we should have fluency in, right? A vocabulary for. Um, there is a lot more space, and now people are looking for tools to be able to have conversations that are authentic and impactful. And Emma is somebody who is a licensed marriage and family therapist, has been designing courses that help people go through the process of figuring out how to navigate emotions. So before we turn it over to Emma, I just want to let everybody know. And look at this: we have South Africa, Canada, Norway, Sacramento. I happen to know, Sam, that it is very hot where you are today. Um, Italy, UK. What a terrifically global audience!
Thank
And
you all
looks
for
like,
coming. Yeah.
yeah,
That's so
this is
cool.
amazing. Looks like folks can see us and hear us. Terrific. Thank you so much for letting us know. Um, just so everyone is aware, there will be a replay available of this session. So if you happen to miss a couple of nuggets of wisdom before you can, write down in your notes what you wanted to capture, don't fret. We will send everybody a replay of this session that you'll have access to indefinitely. You can also access it through the Discover YouTube channel, which is how you're tuned in now. So, like and subscribe if you want to get updates about when we have terrific experts like Emma come and share their wisdom with us. Um, Final thing, please feel free to submit questions in the comments. I'll be moderating. We'll be trying to track the thoughts and reactions and questions that come up for you all as we go through this session. And we'll save some time for Q&A at the end, but I'll also be tracking throughout. So if you have anything that comes up that you want to chat with Emma about, just let us know there and I'll make sure that we bring it up. Um, Okay, so without any further ado, Emma is going to be sharing some critical information with us today about emotion processing. So, we have collectively been experiencing a unique type of trauma this past 18 months or so during a pandemic. And everybody, the global snow globe has been shaken, so to speak, and we're all navigating these experiences that are brand new and in a way that we maybe are finding challenging to understand and process. So I think now is a perfect time to hear from Emma about how to cope with, navigate, and start to process in a healthy way everything from anxiety to depression to whatever these experiences are that we're having in this unique time. So Emma, over to you. Take it away.
Well, cool. Thank you so much. And yes, it has been a unique year, hasn't it? I was just thinking like, oh, I did COVID pretty well. That was fine. And then like a couple of weeks ago, I was like, yeah, good job, Emma. A couple of weeks ago, I had like a girls' camp with my church, and I was out there for 2.5 days with a whole bunch of people. And by the end of it, I was like, like I don't know how to be
I
around
don't know how to
so many
people
people.
anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I
it,
do not know how to people anymore. That muscle has atrophied.
yeah,
I have to relearn small talk, and also because what do you say? So, how you been? Well,
yeah. Well, I've
I've
been
been
locked
stuck
in
in
a
my
house
house for
for
a
a
year.
year.
Yeah, same as you.
Yeah, but one of the reasons why we all feel like less socially capable is because of neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to adapt,
Mm,
right? And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And the cool thing is our brain can adapt to like that kind of traumatic quarantine period, and
good
can get
news.
better at being not social, and then it can get better again at being social again. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So,
Terrific.
and
All right, pull up your
um,
presentation.
oh, thanks. Yep. And just so the audience knows, I mean, I prepared too many slides. I like to fire hose people, but I'm going to be skipping slides. I mean, and if you guys have questions as I go, or you want me to clarify or slow down, just go ahead and mention it in the comments. Ashley's going to be scanning those, passing them along to me. So really, my message is you can change your brain, you can change your life. And I believe in real change. And I believe in that because I've seen it. I got my start in wilderness therapy. Well, I've worked with youth
Ah,
since 2004, but I was working with wilderness therapy programs. We would spend the kids would be out there 8 to 10 weeks, and I'd be out there 8 to 10 days at a time, hiking and walking and talking with these youth. And the incredible thing is, we'd start with these kids who were angry, maybe addicted to drugs, they hated their parents, they were miserable, maybe they were depressed or anxious or, even suicidal. And within 8 or 10 weeks, they didn't necessarily have all the life skills they needed, but their perspective on their life had completely shifted. And I believe in the power of real change and real interventions, and I've seen it with hundreds of people over the last decade, thousands, I'm sure. So that's what we're talking about, real change. I really believe it's possible. So here's what I'm going to talk about. It's kind of a lot, so we'll see how much we get to. But we're going to talk about how neuroplasticity gives us hope for mental health. We're going to talk about the 5 steps of emotion processing, the function of painful emotions and how to make peace with them, and some skills for managing anxiety. So there's this old idea, right? And this really kind of came to fruition in the 80s and 90s. This old idea was that the reason you're depressed or the cause of depression and anxiety is simply brain chemistry, right? That brain chemistry is what's causing depression. And some of the time it does, right? Some of the time your brain chemistry is the contributing factor to depression or anxiety. But the assumption really was this fixed mindset that you either have a disorder or you don't. And the really, reductionistic approach, the boiled down solution was the only real solution is just kind of, take some medication to change your brain chemistry. And that's going to be the only thing you can really do. And you kind of just need to cope with this disorder for the rest of your life. So in the 80s and 90s, as Prozac's being developed and as mental health field is starting to grow and understand brain health, a lot of people got a very simplistic idea about mental health, that you either have depression or anxiety or you don't, and the only real treatment was um, medication. But basically, new research based on new technologies have proven that the way we think actually changes our brain chemistry, and the way we act actually changes our brain chemistry. So it's not like just a simple. It's not as simple as just saying a chemical imbalance causes mental illness. Now, chemical imbalance is part of it, and medication is a really good treatment option. There's like a lot of good treatment options. Medication is just one of them. So when we understand brain health from a bigger perspective, we can develop a little bit more freedom and a lot more options for how to improve our mental health other than simply medication. So let's just talk about this, right? New technology has changed our understanding of how the brain works. We didn't used to be able to see into the brain, but we got better technology so that we can now. And we've learned that people can really change their brains. So one of the first things that we have discovered, one of the very first studies on this was the London taxi driver study. And they measured these, let me back up. In London, to become a taxi driver, you have to take this huge test called the knowledge. And to become a taxi driver, you have to memorize basically every street in London and every event and all the back roads and like all these things. And it's like 200,000 facts that someone has to memorize to become a taxi
Pre-Uber,
driver.
pre-Lyft,
Hmm.
the original, yeah, the original knowledge base you had to have to be able to drive a taxi.
That's right. Yep. And they didn't have a GPS, right? Didn't have a phone that could guide you to any of these places. So these people would spend up to 4 years studying to take this test. And this was right when brain imaging was being developed. And they found that they would measure people's brains before they did 4 years of studying, and they'd measure them after. And they found that the physical structures in the brain had changed size. So the parts of the brain that uh, paid attention, the parts of the brain that managed memory and mapping and planning and executive functioning, like planning steps, all those parts of the brain actually physically grew as people studied it for this test. So how they thought changed their physical structures in their brain. And another really common example of neuroplasticity is this guy. His name's Daniel Kish. Have you ever heard of him, Ashley?
No, I haven't.
So he was born sighted, and he developed cancer in his eye, and
Oh,
he became blind, and he taught himself to use echolocation like a bat would. So he's completely blind, and he can bike down the road, and he makes clicks with his mouth. You can see his mouth is open in this picture.
yeah,
He makes
yeah.
clicks with his mouth, and he can hear the sound bouncing off of the objects around him, and he creates a visual map in his mind just like a bat would. And they used brain scanning to check what was going on there, and they found that the visual cortex of his brain, the part of your brain that normally would process visual information, had completely converted to processing auditory information. So his brain was seeing
Wow.
with sound.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, and so he teaches other people who are blind to do this, and he trains them to do this. And there's been multiple studies showing that people who learn this change the physical structures
The
of their
structure of
brain.
the brain actually shifts.
Yep.
Wow.
So this is all called neuroplasticity, right? Our
Mm.
brain is super flexible, and it has the ability to grow and to adapt to the circumstances we're in. So just like with COVID, we all maybe got a little bit better at being alone, and we found ways to fill that, and we kind of adapted, like downshifted into spending more quiet time. And now that we're like kind of, at least in the United States, kind of coming out of the pandemic, we have to use this neuroplasticity skill again to like kind of readapt to being social.
Mhm.
Neuroplasticity, I love it, but it also it's a double-edged sword, right? Like we can adapt to any kind of circumstance for better or worse. So we have to constantly be choosing what we're going to focus on so that we can choose how our brain
Mm.
develops. Yeah. So this is a functional MRI image. This is an actual image of neural pathways. This was published in the National Geographic a couple of years ago, and they're able to actually map what electrical pulses go through your brain when you think about certain things. So I think this is so cool. I'm such a nerd.
No,
Um,
this is cool. This is like art cool, you know?
yeah, like I would
Yeah.
hang this on my wall, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
But how this applies to mental health is, they've started to do studies, and when someone's experiencing PTSD or depression or anxiety, there's a couple parts of their brain that get affected. So this big part is the hippocampus, and it processes memories and how we think about memories. And in people with PTSD, depression, and anxiety, that part tends to shrink even by 15 or 20%, like a significant amount.
Mm.
And then this little teeny knob down here is the amygdala, and that part processes fear, basically. And people with anxiety, depression, and PTSD, that part, the amygdala tended to be bigger in those people. And they've done so when you develop a mental health disorder, it actually can physically change your brain. Like it does show up in your brain. It's not just like it's not just in your thoughts or in your head, but it's in your physical
Right.
body. But
And it's not
what I love
it's
about
not
this,
like
oh, sorry,
it's
go
not
ahead.
just I was just gonna say it's not just chemical imbalance, right? Which is sort of like this old nomenclature, I guess, that we have for it. But there's this like a physical structural change happening.
Yeah, yeah, your brain gets
Yeah,
impacted.
right.
And so, yeah, there is a change in chemistry, and there is a change in structure, and that shows up in how we think and how we feel. And people can't just get over it, right? They can't just like stop
Hmm.
feeling that way because this is real physiology going on, right? But they've done some really cool studies where they would measure these structures in the brain, and then they do 8 weeks of therapy, 8 weeks of talk therapy, and then measure these structures again. And for many of the participants, they were able to see actual regrowth. So the amygdala would shrink back down, the fear center of the brain would shrink back down, and the hippocampus would grow back and regain its original size. So just like just talking about what's going on and learning new skills actually can change, the physical brain. So I like my takeaways are we kind of talked about this, right? But mental illness does affect the brain, but that doesn't mean they have to be permanent.
Right, right.
Yeah. And how we think can change our brain chemistry, and we have a degree of influence over our brain chemistry. We have a degree of influence over, our brain structure and how well it's working, and we can choose to learn skills that help promote that healthy chemical balance. So,
I, I like what you're saying too about the you can't just get over depression or anxiety, right? So there, which is a helpful cue to let you know that this isn't something that you can just a switch that you can just flip. But then
right.
there's the empowering side of that, which is you can't turn it off, you can't just get over it, but you can condition and train and do these kinds of things that will ultimately have that a longer term impact.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, right? So, yeah, like, if we look at these 2
So
ends of the
helpful.
pendulum, on the far side is like, "Just get over it," like, pull
Right,
yourself
right.
up by your bootstraps and just be positive. And that's generally not super helpful. And then on the opposite side of that spectrum is, like, super duper mental health acceptance to the degree that people are like, "Oh, I have depression, and this is a permanent character trait
Just
that I
what it
can
is
never
all the
do
time.
anything." Yeah, like, I
Yeah.
am depression. And what I am constantly like getting on my soapbox about is just like I've seen massive change happen, and if you
Mm.
learn the skills, you can do something different that can make a huge difference. Um,
Yeah.
and so I like in my experience, I have seen some people who have experienced like permanent, severe, persistent mental illness, but for the vast majority of people, there's like 500 interventions you can try. So before you
Mm.
give up on yourself, try a handful of them. Like, try a few of them and see what
Yeah.
can make a huge difference. Because 'cause I've seen it in the environments I've worked in that,
I
like,
love
really
that element of empowerment, which is such a I mean, as somebody who has struggled with anxiety and depression, like to me, that's always the trickiest or like one of the hardest components of it is feeling powerless. But
yeah,
having, knowing with these nuanced conversations and what we are learning about the brain, informing myself and understanding the vocabulary and that there are these interventions is very empowering.
mhm. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Most people don't get any mental health education growing up,
Right. Right.
other than, like, what their parents teach them, which may or may not be helpful.
Which
So
right.
yeah, so people get stuck in, like, the one side of this pendulum thinking like, "Well, I've tried to just feel better. That didn't work. So maybe it's hopeless."
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, working in treatment where, so I worked in wilderness therapy, and then I worked in residential treatment. In residential treatment, we'd get kids who were really a lot of the program I worked at, a lot of the kids were very severe. They would have multiple diagnoses, very severe, and we're gonna talk about one of them today. But, I saw how when they had, like, a consistent structure and good nutrition and exercise and medical support and psychiatric support and, like, therapy 15 hours a week, that people with so-called, like, permanent diagnoses, like a bipolar disorder diagnosis, by the end of 10 months of treatment, they were, like, healthy, like,
Yeah.
absolutely
Wow.
healthy. So, but most people don't have access to that. right? Most people don't have access to residential treatment or
Yeah.
15 hours of therapy a week, right?
Yeah, there's a deep friction and barrier there.
Hmm. Yeah, which is why I make my content, right? To
Oh
make
yeah,
mental health
which is why
education
you
more
have your
accessible.
YouTube channel, and when we've got some folks who are, noting in the comments here, like, oh, I've been watching Emma's YouTube channel for a while now, and I love the connective tissue there between the fact that in order for people to benefit from this information, you have to be able to access it, and not
Mhm.
everybody has the ability to access, residential treatment. But here are some ways that we can start to build habits and practices for ourselves, through just like this really helpful content. So sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt. Please continue. I'm full of hope.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and so yeah, you look at like a residential treatment program where I saw these massive changes and people are getting maybe 20 interventions a day, right? Where interventions meaning a staff talking with them and helping them process their
Mm,
emotions. All the programs I worked for were super gentle, very relationship based. We didn't use consequences, we didn't use force. We were just very loving and supportive. That was the kind of program I worked for. But when I say intervention, I mean like someone would sit down and be like, "Hey, how are you feeling? You look sad. Let's talk about it." Like that's what I mean.
mm,
And what I'm going to talk about, I mean, we're probably not going to get to this slide because I talk too much, but really when it comes down to it, 1% change a day, just like one little skill that you work on every day over the course of a year can have a huge impact in the long run. So, I mean that's why I make my YouTube channel, right? 15 minutes
yeah.
once a week. Watch this video, try to apply these skills, and your life could be like 1% better. And you apply that over the course of a year, it can make a huge
That's a big
difference.
old difference.
Yeah. I stole this picture off of my old employer's website, Wingate Wilderness Therapy. Um, I don't know this person in particular, but this is what would happen. We get these kids who were so angry and so depressed, and their parents would come out 10 weeks later, and they would be like, "I want a better life." They'd be happy. Their faces would
Mm,
change. And I believe that improving mental health is a skill that can be learned. It's not something you either have or don't have. I think it's a skill that
mm-hmm.
can be learned. So. So what's the skill? It's emotion processing. This is what I call it, right? It's like cleaning out your nasty living room.
Oh.
It's like learning to see like if you live in this living room for a year, you're going to be like, well, maybe this is just normal. I don't even know
This
what
is
is
just
going on. I
life.
just know I'm overwhelmed. And the emotion processing is like, oh, what's here? What do I have going on? Like, we're gonna like step one is noticing emotions without judgment, like naming the emotions, slowing yourself down, calming your nervous system, and then step four is like exploring, right? Like looking at your thoughts. Which thoughts are helpful? Which circumstances impact me this way? And then emotion processing is choosing action. What am I going to do with this bag of
Mm,
clothes? I'm going to take it to the thrift store. What am I going to do with this feeling of worthlessness? Okay, I'm going to write about it. I'm going to explore it. I'm going to choose self compassion, or I'm going to choose this skill, or I'm going to choose this cognitive distortion antidote, or whatever. So when you build these skills, you can choose action to kind of clear out this backlog of poopy emotions.
I love that. I love that. I had a professor one time who we were actually talking about personality types and when you're engaging with somebody who's, who's an introvert and you're an extrovert, but he gave this phrase that reminds me of what you're saying right now, which is anytime you encounter something that that you want to process without judgment, starting by saying, isn't that interesting? Like, and then going to the next part is like, isn't that interesting? I'm feeling
Yeah,
like I'm feeling lazy about this bag of clothes right here. What am I going to do with that? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll just move the clothes. Or maybe I'll do it later.
yeah. Or
Isn't
just
that
being
interesting?
curious, like, huh,
Being
I'm
curious
feeling
about it.
lazy.
Yeah.
What's that feel like? Like I'm
What's going on with
curious. Isn't
that?
that interesting? I
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. And that's like this first step, right? Noticing emotions without judgment. Like being curious is a huge part of willingness. Like I'm willing to feel this emotion long enough to be curious about it.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's a big part of this first step. So I wanted to share this story of one of my old clients. I've changed her name, but she came to treatment with extreme anxiety, social anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. She had spent 3 months in a psych ward before coming to see me at the program I was at, and she didn't speak for 3 months at the psych hospital.
Wow.
So that, I mean, she met the criteria for selective mutism, and her mother was on the autism spectrum. And so when she tried to be really caring, the mother was very caring, but when she tried to express her care, it sometimes came across as very intense and critical. So this
Mm.
this is Molly, and I've got to go fast because I don't have much time. But in the beginning, the staff were kind of like, okay, she's not talking, she's not eating, she's not taking her meds. Maybe we can't treat this person. I mean, she was completely shut down. And this is normal for a lot of people. A lot of us get overwhelmed by our emotions, and we don't even know what to do with them. So we try to make them go away as quickly as possible. We try and do this by getting like blowing up, getting angry, or avoiding, distracting, watching Netflix, doing drugs. Like that is like I think people's most common reaction to emotions is like, I don't like this. I need to make this go away.
Mm.
So the first step of emotion processing, like we were talking about, right? It's like kind of being curious, learning to notice emotions without judging them. And I think a lot of us have been taught that there are positive emotions and there are negative emotions. And if we think of anxiety as a negative emotion, then it limits our options of what to do about it. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about why I actually want my kids to feel anxiety, guilt, and grief occasionally. I
Mm.
want them to feel anxiety because anxiety sometimes is a warning signal. Sometimes it means nothing. Anxiety is like a smoke alarm. Sometimes you feel anxious and it's not real. There's no danger. And sometimes you feel anxious and you're standing on a cliff and your anxiety helps you back up a little bit, right? Or if you're like, I want my kids to feel a little nervous about the busy road right in front of my house,
Yeah.
because I don't want them to just run into the road. So I talk about this a lot. I've got YouTube videos on this, but these emotions are not inherently bad.
They
They're
have
inherent.
utility. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a function.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and if you want your child to never ever feel grief, like the only option is to never ever love someone. Like to never be passionate,
Yeah.
right? Like so I want my children to feel the feelings. I just want them to know what to do with them. Emotions serve a lot of functions. They're warning signs, they motivate us to change, they help us connect to other humans. And so if we just try to cope with them, it doesn't help us know what to do with them. And I've
Right.
got this chart all about all the function of emotions. I'm just going to talk about one, guilt. If I punch someone in the nose, I am supposed to most likely feel a little bit of guilt. And that guilt asks me, did I do something wrong? It doesn't mean I did something wrong. It asks me, did I do something wrong?
It
And let's say
asks
this
you.
person was like hurting my kids, then I would say, no, I did nothing wrong. That was the right thing to do. And I would let that guilt move along, but I would address it, right? And if I punched my neighbor in the face over, I don't know, something dumb, I should feel guilt. And that guilt should motivate me to make repairs and to pay for their medical bills and to go to anger management and to, make the changes that I need to make. So,
Love that. I
so
love the frame. I love the frame of instead of thinking of an emotion as positive or negative, thinking about it in terms of what it is asking you. Like each
yeah,
emotion you experience is asking you a question. What is the
yeah.
question that it's asking you? I love that. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
Yeah, and so anxiety asks the question like, "Am I in danger?" And a lot of times with
Mm.
anxiety, the answer is no. You're not in danger. You're just feeling this. So you got to know what to do with those extra feelings. Um, but yeah, emotions ask a question, and
I
emotions.
love
I don't
that.
think there's good and bad emotions. I think there's comfortable emotions and uncomfortable emotions. But just because something's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad.
Doesn't mean it's bad. Yeah.
Oh, that's a video of my daughter. I've got to skip this. I just don't have time to tell this story. But
Oh,
hopefully, okay, I'll tell this story because it's
oh,
such a
it's
good one.
very cute.
Um, I just don't want this video to autoplay before I lay the foundation. So my daughter is a really highly sensitive person like me. She feels the emotions really intensely, and it would be easy to call her anxious. I don't think she's
Mm.
necessarily anxious, but she is like sensitive and intense, and she gets scared easily. So she's 6. We went to the water park the other day for the first time, I think since, 2 years, right? And so she was 4 last
Probably.
time. She didn't do any slides or anything, and her friends wanted to do this huge water slide, and it's got this big staircase up to the top. And, so I'm waiting in line with her as we very, very, very slowly go up this big staircase while we wait in line for all the people in front of us to do the water slide, and she starts getting really scared and really anxious and really nervous. And, I'm pretty consistent with her. It would be easy as a parent to be like, "Oh, if this makes you anxious, you can avoid it. We don't need to do this." And I was pretty consistent with her, like, "You can choose. You don't need to you don't have to do this water slide. It's your choice."
Yeah.
But, just because you feel anxious doesn't mean it's bad. It's okay to feel a
You're
little
in danger.
nervous. And it's okay to feel a little excited. It's okay to feel a little scared. And by the top, she was crying, and I was like, "You have a choice. It's total." I never ever was like, "You have to do this. You have to face your fear," you know? But I was like, "It's your choice. It's your choice." And we have a saying in our family, like, "I can do hard things." And she's like, "I can do this. I can do hard things."
Do hard things.
Let's see if it auto plays. All right. So this is her coming off the water slide at the rec center.
I'm so invested in this. Yes, she can do hard things.
So that's my
Did you
6-year-old.
like it? Yes.
Yeah, that's her face, right? I think the screenshot.
I can do hard things.
When you change the way you think about emotions, your relationship to your emotions changes. So it's no longer like, I have to make my anxiety go away no matter what. Instead, it's like, okay, this feeling is uncomfortable, but it's not bad. And we gain a trust in our own ability to do hard things. And the only reason, well, I don't know, she's a brave girl. She's an intense girl. But one of the reasons she was able to do that is because she's consistently like working to do scary stuff. Like her sister has no
Yeah.
fear. Her sister's like 4 and will pick up snakes and chase snakes down and pet every dog. And Aaliyah's like,
It's just like whatever.
but she always like tries to like touch the snake like just a little bit.
Just a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, but in a sense, there's more going on because if you're experiencing an absence of fear, then you're I would defer to you on this, but my guess would be that you're not that there's not a whole lot of adaptive neuroplasticity happening for your fearless daughter to pick up the snake, whereas for your 6-year-old, there's mental work happening there that's like, I'm feeling this way. Am I actually in danger? What choice do I want to make with it? Where
Yep.
it's almost like that's there's more going on there. So maybe more to celebrate, more reason for this face right here, right?
Yeah, and I think for people who are highly sensitive, like, they have to learn how to do those steps, right? Like,
Yeah,
"Okay,
yeah,
this is what I'm feeling. I can take a deep breath. I can slow down. It's okay to feel scared. What do I care about? I'm gonna choose to do it anyway, even though it's
yeah.
hard," you know?
I'm
Whereas
and a
it
question.
yeah. Mhm.
Oh, sorry. A question from our audience. Caroline's asking if this information applies similarly to people with OCD as well. Like, is this are there similar processes that you would go through for, asking yourselves this question, slowing down, and making the choices?
Absolutely, and OCD is a really specific treatment. So,
Hmm.
when I talk with people with OCD, I do recommend they see an OCD specific therapist. So if you have OCD used to be considered in the anxiety disorder category, but, with OCD, the best treatment is not learning to calm yourself down and cope and soothe. The very best treatment for OCD is called exposure response prevention. So
Hmm.
if you are nervous about germs, you go and intentionally touch stuff, and then you intentionally don't wash your hands, and you intentionally say, "Anxiety, bring it on," and
Mm.
let yourself feel really anxious, and then you learn, like, okay, do your worst, anxiety, and then you learn,
Okay.
like, I can handle feeling this feeling.
Yeah.
Because with the anxiety cycle, when you feel anxiety and you avoid it, your brain thinks that the only reason you survived is because you
It's
avoided it.
because you
So your
avoided
brain
it.
says
Mm.
so your brain says, "I'm gonna increase your
Yeah.
anxiety to
Gotta
keep you
keep
alive
doing
for the
that.
next time, So every time you avoid something that gives you anxiety, your brain is going to take your anxiety up just a little bit. Now, this is good if it's a real danger. Like, let's say it's, I don't know, maybe you feel anxious when you drive down the highway at 150 miles an hour. Like, you should feel a little nervous about this, and you shouldn't do that. And then the
And
next
it's
time,
right for your brain
like,
to tell you, okay, the reason that we're safe is because we avoided driving 150 miles an hour. Like,
yeah,
probably correct.
yeah. So it's okay to avoid, like, to choose what you're going to have in your life and what you're going to avoid.
Right,
This is an
right.
important part of processing emotions. But with
Love that.
OCD, the problem is the thoughts really are kind of a false smoke alarm. They're saying, you're in
Mm-hmm.
danger, when reality is, there's no fire. So you
But
have
such a
to,
but such a fascinating thing, and understanding a bit more about neuroplasticity and the fact that your brain is adapting based on what it thinks is keeping you safe,
yeah,
but a lot of that information is stored up from, evolutionarily, from a long time ago when we were actually running from bears, and in fact now you can negotiate with your brain and tell it, okay, so this thing is not actually dangerous, and I that's a fascinating way to think about it.
yep. And so then my daughter, how do you think she felt the next time she did the slide?
She was like, let's go.
Yeah, I
Oh my
survived
god,
the
based on this
slide. Let's
face.
do it again. Anxiety
That
went
was
down.
awesome.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
anxiety goes down when you face things, and when you process emotions, you actually do get feeling better. So sometimes when I talk, people
Mm,
think I'm saying, "Oh, you should just feel crappy all the time." Well, actually, when you process emotions, you do get feeling better. She felt less anxious, and she did the slide 50 more times. Um,
mm-hmm.
but there are still, like, inherent emotions that come with living a life you value. Like, doing live presentations makes me a little nervous, like, but I value this, and it helps people, so I value it, so I'm gonna choose to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this mutual process of, like, I'm accepting emotions, and I'm kinda cleaning up the ones that are a little messy.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I'm a speaker coach. I've worked at TED, and one of the things that we always talked about is, I mean, so many people have this fear of public speaking and presentation, but it is very much the type of thing where the more you do it, the fear initially is information for you about how you feel about this thing that you're doing or the content that you're sharing, right? When you're anxious about it, it's because you have something, an important gift to give. And that helps you choose, okay, I might be scared, but I'm going to do this thing anyway, or I'm going to make this choice. And then I have seen in my work exactly what you're saying play out, which is if you can ask yourself that question, is it, yes, I'm scared or nervous, is it worth doing anyway? And then you develop a level of comfort that doesn't mean that you're just all of a sudden comfortable public speaking. I've been doing it for a bazillion years and still get sweaty palms and
Yeah,
pit stains. Like that's never gone away. But
yeah,
no, but I just know the choice that I'm gonna make. I'm gonna do it anyway.
right. Yep, and then you get 2 things, right? Generally, the anxiety goes down, but even if it
Hmm.
doesn't, you're living the life that you value.
That you want it, that you value. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that frame.
you're living the life that you wanna live, and so, yeah, from my perspective, processing emotions and getting better at feeling is about, like, increasing your capacity to feel so that you can still choose what you wanna choose and what you wanna do, so
Mm.
your emotions don't make your
Hmm.
choices for you.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, looks like, I did that slide twice. So, step 2 is naming your emotions. We've talked a lot about this on my YouTube channel. Oh, there's a big difference between saying, I feel like the world is a terrible place. I feel like the country is going downhill. I feel like nothing ever is good in my entire life. That's not actually an I feel statement. So I'll work with clients, and so they'll come in and they're like, "Oh my gosh, everything awful happened this week and all these bad things and all this stuff and everything, and I'm so worried, blah, 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 blah." And 30 minutes into the session, I'll say, "You have not used one emotion word yet. You have to
Mm.
stop and say, 'I feel,' followed by an emotion word."
An emotion.
Yeah, like sad, anxious, whatever. I've got a free mood tracker on my website. There's a bunch of other skills in this section, but like naming your emotions, in my opinion, 60% of the work of emotion processing is just getting good at like naming what you're feeling.
Yeah.
I just got to tell you about Molly really quick. So we start like with Molly, she didn't even speak. Have you ever had a friend who like they're upset but they won't even talk to you?
Oh yeah.
So we started by just helping her feel safe and secure, and then we started suggesting like you look like you feel sad and suggesting words. So if you have a friend who doesn't want to talk, you can maybe tentatively suggest like, are you feeling a little anxious? You know?
Yeah.
And then she would write to me, like she would write me these letters about how she was feeling, but she still wasn't even able to talk. And then we made a vest for her that had Velcro on it. She chose to wear this. This was not like a shameful intervention in any way, but a lot of the kids in the group were like, I want to wear my emotions on my chest. So they'd put these emotion words on their little vest with Velcro and kind of show people in the group. We had such a supportive community. People would show each
Love
other like,
that.
oh, this is what I'm really feeling today. And so naming emotions looks like I am feeling followed by an emotion word. Oh, step 3 of processing emotions is calming yourself down. Let's do an exercise, right? Emotions are stored in your body. We talk about this. A calm body is a calm brain. Molly was stuck in freeze response. Social situations seemed scary. We did a whole bunch of stuff to help her feel safe. Let's do one of those. You can learn these skills on your own. There's progressive muscle relaxation. Deep breathing. Let's all do some deep breathing really quick. Breathe till your stomach sticks out. Do a big yawn. We can actually trigger the parasympathetic response with a big yawn. The parasympathetic response is really connected to that fight, flight, freeze response. I go into a lot more detail on all of these. I mean, we could spend 2 hours on this. But you can calm your nervous system down by doing these things. Step 4 is exploring the thoughts and actions and circumstances that affect how you feel. So this is looking at your lenses, right? Learning to notice which thoughts are helpful and which ones aren't. I'm just going to give a quick example from Molly. We're about done here. But her interactions with her mom really impacted her. She felt like a failure. So the old thought was like, if my mom's upset, it's because I'm a bad person. And because Molly couldn't do anything to make her mom not upset, because her mom was kind of anxious and uptight. She loved her, but she was kind of anxious and uptight. Molly couldn't change that, so she felt hopeless, right? This thought led to her feeling hopeless. And the new thought was, oh, if my mom's upset, it might be because she's anxious. Like this might not be about me. And when she changed how she thought, she was able to decrease her anxiety and focus a little bit more on what she wanted in her life instead of just feeling trapped. Okay, this is the last step, choosing how to act. I spend a lot of time with my clients looking at values. Values are, your chosen life directions, what you want to put time, energy, and effort into. What kind of person do you want to be? So emotion processing is more than just feeling better. It's about getting better at feeling, getting so good at feeling that you can choose the life that you want to live. And I wish I could show you a picture of Molly, because after, she was there maybe 10 months, but she asked herself these questions. What do I want? What do I value? She loved theater, but she's incredibly socially anxious, right? She's a very good friend. She's very funny. She loved to write. She loves her family. So as she changed her relationship with her emotions, she started saying things like, I'm going to try to be social even though I'm scared. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to share some of my writing, even though it's uncomfortable for me. And I'll be a good friend, and I'll write and perform. And because she had processed through so many of her backlog of emotions, she was able to do that. So I got Molly Facebook friended me a couple years after we worked together, and she just finished her advanced degree at a university in England, and she just wrote and directed a 30-minute play that's performing at her state Shakespeare festival. And I have this picture of her just like being hilarious in a play. I wish I could show it to you, but I don't have her permission. So, which is good. She's living her life. So
That's amazing.
emotion processing, it can do good things. Yeah, you can start getting really good at working through emotions. Now, this can seem really overwhelming. So after I was looking at this slide, I'm like, is that offensive? How do you eat an elephant? I'm not actually advocating eating an elephant. But this is like the idea, right? So if someone with a mental health concern watches this, they might be feeling overwhelmed. And I talked about this earlier, but like it's just 1%. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you change your life? It's just 1% a day. Like just make a little tracker for a month and say, this month I'm going to try to sit outside for 5 minutes every day instead of in my house. That's it, right? Or just for one day, I'm going to do that. And that change adds up over time. So there's a ton of skills you can learn. I mean, I like to fire hose people. There are hundreds of skills that can change your life, but you just have to learn one at a time. I've got courses on all these. I've got YouTube videos on these. I've got free resources on all of these. And I see people change. That's my family. I do what I do. I stopped working full time and I started a YouTube channel because I had kids. So that's why I do this.
I love that.
Look at how crazy they all look.
It looks to me like they're living a life that they value.
Yeah, basically.
So there are lots of comments and questions I think that would be useful for lots of folks to hear. Before we dive into the questions, please, audience, friends, join me in thanking Emma for this incredible presentation. I have, I actively pursue a healthy vocabulary, a vocabulary that lets me think about and process mental health, and there have been so many things that we've talked about today that are new and really useful things that I'm excited to kind of put into practice. So please join me in thanking Emma, showing her some love for her generosity of time and knowledge today. Want to remind everyone that there is a link to Emma's course on Teachable, one of the courses that she mentioned during the presentation, pinned right to the top of the YouTube comments that you're looking at right now, how to process your emotions. So definitely check that out. And so many of these questions I think are applicable to a lot of people. So I want to start with this one because I think it's very interesting. What do you think about, or what's your sense of how effective crying can be as a way of processing? Like, where does that fall into?
I saw that question in the comments and I was like, let's answer that one. I cry all the time. I'm an easy crier. My emotions are connected to my tear ducts. Some people are not like that. I personally think crying is a really effective way to work through the bodily impact of emotions, and I am just letting go. As I get older, I'm letting go of shame with that. I'm actually going to make a YouTube video on how I cry with my clients. I'd probably cry with my clients at least once a week.
That's so cool. I love that. I mean, I think especially maybe because with there might be an idea about well, therapists are supposed to be, I don't know, not supposed to outwardly process emotion based on what I'm.
They're supposed to be in control and impermeable. Yeah, it's not my style.
Yeah, I love that. I will definitely be watching that video when you make it. I mean, it is. I mean, you were talking about the parasympathetic, the nervous system, and it. I don't know this medically or anything, but it feels like crying in a lot of ways has a similar impact on my body as deep breathing does. The way that I feel after crying is similar to the way that I feel after I've slow down, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know the whole chemical and physiological connection. Like, I'm not quite sure why the sympathetic response is connected to tears, but it is. So I go with it. I think it works for me. So
interesting. Yeah. Okay, so a couple of other questions are coming up. Uh, there was another one that I wanted to. Oh, okay. This one. So from Trial Tappers, asking about what advice or how we might share some of this content with partners or spouses that are struggling with depression. You know, if you are adjacent to someone who is kind of experiencing this, a mental health challenge or whatever it might be, does the advice change? How does that, how do
Yeah.
we process, how do we help support others in our lives processing their emotions?
Yeah, and my tendency is to throw resources and skills at people. So whenever people come to me and they're like, "Hey, Emma, I want a resource or skill," I'll be like, "Oh, good. Here are 50 of them."
Yeah.
But with someone with anxiety and depression, I have to really be cautious because I'm so excited to help them, and I know things that have helped me and other people that I have a tendency to jump on that and be like, "Here, do all these things." So
Mm,
when I hear someone ask that question, my first tendency is to say, "I made a course on that. It's got 55 videos." And it's like you can learn the skills if you want to learn how to help someone you love with depression and anxiety. These are practical skills that can be learned.
yeah.
And the basic skills are first like learning how to not give advice and learning how to sit with someone and manage your own pain around
Mm,
their pain. And learning how to be a good listener and not trying to change them because they're bugging you. Or like if I watch my child or my husband be emotionally upset, it hurts me, and my immediate
mm.
unconscious reaction is to say, I need to make this go away. I
I
need to
can
make
fix
them feel
this. I can
better.
make it go. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we look at emotion processing, we say, okay, first is noticing this feeling and sitting with it without needing it to go away immediately.
Mm. Yeah, that's learning how to not give advice. That's I think a skill that lots of people can learn regardless of the adjacentness to a mental health struggle.
Yeah, and especially, like, oh, it's hard because that's what I like to do. I like to be like, "Did you know? There's all these skills that'll help you." But really, you gotta start with that foundation of connection and
Mm-hmm.
empathy and not like, start where you're at instead of where you wish they were or where
Right,
you wish,
right.
like, that it was. So,
And recognizing that what you yourself are bringing and to like that you have your own agenda, not necessarily an intentional, here's like a thing that you're trying to act out, but even subconsciously, like you were mentioning about, well, if my child is in pain, I want to make that go away because it causes me pain. So recognizing that you have that part of that, what you're experiencing is your own emotion,
yeah.
um, and going through the process for yourself. Yeah, it's really useful. Um, okay, let's see. There was another question here that I thought was a really good. Um, lots of love coming in the comments here about how helpful your content is and how much your channel has helped folks and your courses. This is really really lovely. Oh yeah, you mentioned an emotion tracker on your. You said that's something that's on your website. So
Yeah, I
in
saw that
service of just
comment.
like
I
the.
just I just looked to see where that's located. I'm gonna put it in a more obvious place on my website in the next day or 2. If you search I can't put this into the comment box, I don't think. Well, if you go to my website
You want to
or you
send
search.
if you want to send it to me, you can
Oh,
send
yeah,
it to me in the private chat, and then I can put it in the comment.
perfect. It's under the name Entertainment Video. So, yeah, Ashley's gonna pop that up for you guys. There
Got
is
it.
a free emotion tracker.
You gotta name it to tame it.
Yep. That's a Dan
There you
Siegel
go.
phrase. I did not invent that, so credit Dan Siegel on that. He's a
Yes,
great
I.
artist.
Yeah, yeah, his work is fascinating. I mean, in the context, it's funny how I think I approach some of this work in the context of working with young people, and how do you help children develop a sense of their own emotional lives and what things mean, and navigating, everything from a temper tantrum to whatever it is. And it's almost an easier way to enter the conversation to recognize that children need help learning emotions
Yeah.
than it is to fully recognize, oh, you know who else does? All of us.
Yep, yep. And when I hear about parents who are like, how do I help my child with anxiety? I say, let me help you with your anxiety. And once you
Mm,
learn those skills, you'll know what to do with your kid, because
you'll
like
know what
as
to do.
parents, it's so hard. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of folks are saying that too. Actually, I love this. Marie is saying, thank you, Emma. Me and my mom watched this together and found it so helpful. All right, so you're developing multi-generational vocabulary there.
Aw.
So definitely check out Emma's course about emotion processing, which the I just posted the link, or the link is on the top of the YouTube channel, and I'll just drop it here again, just so everybody has easy access to it. Like I mentioned at the top of this event, you will have access to this recording so that you'll be able to replay it. You'll get that via email. Definitely, if you are a curious person, which hopefully we're all on our way to building curiosity as a muscle that we can develop and continue to use and grow. Um, Discover how we have lots of really great content from creators who are so generous, like Emma, and sharing their wisdom and knowledge and helping us build skills, from everything in the mental health category to how to the culinary arts and music and all of these things. And who knows, you might have a calming coping skill just around the corner. So check out some of the other stuff on the Teachable channel. Like and subscribe there if you want to get updates on when we have experts like Emma joining us. Um, Thank you, Emma, so much for your time and generosity with this knowledge that you have. I'm really excited to put into practice some of these things that we've talked about today.
Oh,
Um,
thank you so much for having me, and everyone who came. Really appreciate you all and your positive feedback. So glad everyone was here.
Yes, terrific. And those of you in the audience, thank you all so much for being with us from all over the world. Do check out Emma's course, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye.